It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Joe Nagle, who is president and CEO of Delta Dental of Rhode Island for like 27 years, which includes Altus Dental Insurance Company in Massachusetts and First Circle Inc., which is the parent company of Chewsi Dental, the whole new way to save on and pay for dental care. Joe has been long on the leading edge of employee benefits. Prior to joining Delta Dental in 1992, he was a founding partner of the Capstone Group, a Providence-based healthcare consulting firm, and he previously held executive roles at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Rhode Island and United Health Plans of New England. His career began at the international accounting and consulting firm of Ernst Young. A self-described rational optimist, Joe believes that thinking differently is at the core of remaining competitive at a business, and that disruption and change, while uncomfortable at times, are both inevitable and essential. I invited you on the show, and I was so honored you come in because most insurance companies are kind of afraid of dentists because they know dentists are kind of like that union mentality where they want like all crowns covered at like a $10,000. They just want to come in on Monday morning, do a $10,000 crown and go home, and they don't like to hear about competition and checks and balances, and they never ever really get to hear from the insurance side of the story. Most dentists are always listening to other dentists talk about root canals, fillings, crowns, and implants. It's just such a huge honor to get one of the legends of Delta Dental for almost 30 years to come on and share what it's like sitting on your side of the dental equation. Thanks for coming on the show, Joe.
Glad to be here.
So most podcasters are young. Most of them, a quarter of these guys are still in dental school. Most are 30 and under. They're going to be, so almost everyone listening to you is a dentist provider. What's it like sitting on the other side of the table, trying to get Fortune 500 companies and small businesses to buy dental insurance? And how is that business going? And what technologies do you see that are currently disrupting it?
Well, Howard, first of all, thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. I'm going to spend probably just a little bit of time on the insurance aspect of this because Chewsi is really very, very different. It's not insurance, and I think it's a product that I think that dentists will embrace. Here at Delta Dental of Rhode Island, we're part of the National Delta Dental Plans Association, and one of the ways to look at that is it's effectively a franchise. We are limited to selling Delta Dental products to companies who are headquartered here in Rhode Island. But we've been very successful. We're in the smallest state in the country, but we have the second largest market share of any Delta Dental plan. And we have clients such as CBS Health is our largest client, Citizens Financial Group, Amica Insurance, lots of publicly traded large companies who have lots of market clout. So dental insurance is very different, and it serves a role. Proud to be associated with Delta Dental and Altus Dental. We started Altus Dental so we could expand beyond our Delta Dental franchise area. And in Massachusetts, we have about 180,000 Altus Dental members. But last year, we started Chewsi because we know that there is a void for all those people who need oral health care but can't afford dental insurance and their employer doesn't cover that. So I look at the Chewsi product as very, very different from dental insurance. From the user perspective, the consumer perspective, that person, if you're a part-timer, you typically don't get access to insurance from your employer. If you're a retiree, it's very difficult to find coverage for a retiree. But even people who are covered by dental insurance, our experience shows that roughly 20% of them have a service that was submitted to us as Delta Dental or Altus Dental, but was denied because it wasn't covered by their employer's plan. It could be over the maximum. It could be beyond a frequency limitation. It could be because it's cosmetic service, teeth whitening, occlusal guards. So that roughly 20% that isn't covered could be covered by Chewsi. So Chewsi effectively covers any oral health service that isn't covered by insurance, whether you have it or you don't have it. As long as it's not covered, Chewsi's there. Some of the nice things about, from the employer perspective in terms of wanting to promote Chewsi, is that it gives them an opportunity to provide a benefit to their employees who they don't provide it to. I mentioned part-timers as a good example. Their retirees who go into a decision to accept COBRA have another choice now in opting for Chewsi. It wraps around their insurance plan, so it enriches that offering. And there's really no administrative duties for the employer. They simply tell their employees about the existence of Chewsi. They don't have to process monthly enrollment files. They don't have to process payroll deductions. From the dentist perspective, we think that's really where the revolutionary part of this is, because it is really in some ways the answer to dentists who are frustrated with dental insurance. And we communicate that when we're recruiting dentists, that Chewsi helps them get more patients and more service per patient. It really helps with case acceptance. I can give an example of someone who, where typically our annual maximum on the insurance side is $1,200, sometimes $2,000. There is no annual max with Chewsi. So, we've had a patient who has as much as $27,000 worth of dental services and still saved roughly $6,500 in that care. So Chewsi gets that person savings they can't get on their own. Chewsi doesn't get in between the relationship between the dentist and their patient. That clinical relationship is preserved. There are no delays in authorizing care. There are no denials. As long as that dentist and that patient agree on the course of action, Chewsi is here to help that person afford it. We have competitive fee schedules, typically more than a PPO would pay a dentist. And we pick up the credit card processing that typically costs about 3% of a transaction for the dentist. So it's a win-win. I think it's a difficult concept for dentists to understand because it doesn't really exist today. It's not like a discount dental plan because the user doesn't have to pay a monthly cost of $15 to $20 as they would. For the Chewsi user, they simply download the app for free and they use it with no monthly charges. So they pay nothing unless and until they have a service. Then they pay the dentist for that service using their smartphone app, the Chewsi app. While they're in the office, they simply authorize that payment and they're done.
That is amazing. How is it only available for dentists in Rhode Island right now?
No, we intend to make it a national product. We started first in Rhode Island. Once we had created and perfected the app, we started recruiting dentists by 3-digit zip code. And once we had enough dentists in a 3-digit zip, we'd activate the app. So we went live in Rhode Island, about a year ago. We started out with about 20% of the dentists in Rhode Island participating with Chewsi. We're now at 50%, and we think that over time we'll be at 75%. We're now live throughout all of Massachusetts. So there's another 6.5 million people who can get access to this app there. And we now have announced plans and have contracted with partners to introduce Chewsi into 9 other states. So we're now starting to recruit in Connecticut, New Jersey, Hawaii, not exactly a contiguous expansion, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, parts of Kansas, parts of Illinois. And I really think that by the end of this year, there'll be another 10 states where Chewsi will be starting to be introduced to the population there. But with these 9 additional states, Chewsi will be available over the next few months to 36 million people in the country.
That is just some amazing disruptive numbers. Now, that's not part of Delta Dental of Rhode Island. You had to start a separate company, First Circle Inc. and Altus Dental Insurance Company, so it wouldn't violate your Delta Dental contracts?
Exactly. There are strict and really appropriate prohibitions on co-branding Delta Dental with another product unless there's authorization from the association. And so Altus Dental, by example, actually competes with Delta Dental of Massachusetts there. So we can't use the Delta Dental network. We had to create our own brand for Altus, and that's been very successful. We filled a niche that really was not being served, particularly for the smaller employers and municipalities. So we have 180,000 people with Altus in Massachusetts, and that's performed very well. But expanding as an insurance company takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And since Chewsi doesn't have those regulatory restrictions, we can go national much faster.
Yeah, it's a highly regulated industry, isn't it, insurance?
It really is. It's a highly competitive industry as well. And so that's one of the reasons why insurance isn't as friendly to dentists, is because you're competing against other insurers. And the objective really is to get that level of coverage at the lowest possible price. Otherwise, your client goes to another competitor. So with Chewsi, that's not the case. For the first time, I think in history, a so-called carrier like Chewsi is aligned with dentists. The more a dentist does, actually, the happier we are. The more something costs, the happier we are. Because what we're trying to get as a model is for our customer, the Chewsi member, to save roughly 20 to 25% on the service. And we're not trying to get to the lowest possible price. We're trying to get to a price that that person can't get on their own. So as dental submitted charges go up year after year, we're going to monitor that and increase fees. We've already increased fees twice in Rhode Island for Chewsi dentists. So we want to lock in savings that are in that range that a customer sees value, 20 to 25%. But we're not trying to get to 35 or 40%. It does us no good. So we intend to keep on increasing fees. And as you probably know around the country, plans have, if not frozen fees, even rolled them back in cases in order to meet the demands of employers. So this is a new product. It's a new niche. It really is going after a different market than what insurance goes after, but it's complementary to insurance too. And I think over time we'll see somewhat of a shift from some people who will drop their insurance when they look at the economics of this. And let me give you an example that in Rhode Island and in other states, I'll describe a small employer as somebody who has 100 employees or less. And in that model, the administrative cost in that insurance premium typically averages for everybody 20-25% of the premium. Then typically there's a broker commission involved, and that's often around 10%. And then you have premium taxes, and you have the ACA fees when they're in effect, the Obamacare fees. You get up to about 40% of what that premium is that doesn't go to care. And with Chewsi, better than 90 cents on the dollar goes to care. So it's a model that gets more dollars in the hands of the practicing dentist and more value to the Chewsi member.
Wow. So the broker fees 10%, your dental insurance company admin overhead fees 25%, and the last part, the Obamacare regulation.
Yeah,
tax?
Premium taxes and Obamacare fees are typically 2% each. Now, Obamacare fees have been waived for 2 of the last 3 years, so they're not in effect, but they could go back into effect next year. Who knows? But I'm talking about the insurance side. On Chewsi, there are no broker commissions.
Yeah, what was the 2% each? 2% Obamacare and 2% what?
Rhode Island, like many states, has a premium tax, and in Rhode Island, that premium tax is 2%. And the ACA fees that are charged when they're in effect, and they were suspended last year, and they're going to be introduced again, are again 2% of the premium to pay for all the costs of running these exchanges. So while Delta Dental's administrative expenses as a whole are 9%, large employers with the economies of scale pay less than that. Small employers pay more than that. And so it makes it a difficult proposition when 40 cents on the dollar doesn't go to care for small group insurance. And with Chewsi, 90 cents on the dollar or more goes to care.
And so right now on Chewsi, you said 50% of the dentists in Rhode Island are already participating?
That's true, yes.
Well, you already hit a home run. How you couldn't have started a business and expected to have more success than that. I mean, you got to consider it a home run victory at this point.
Well, we're very happy with that, and the momentum is off the charts. I don't know if you're familiar with this term Net Promoter Score. Have you heard of that term?
No.
It's a term used by many businesses across the country to determine customer satisfaction. And what it essentially does is it asks the customer whether or not they are likely to recommend this product or service to a friend or a family member. And on a scale from 0 to 10, that person answers. But it's such a high bar to do well on this that only 9s and 10s count for you, and everything else is a detractor or a neutral score. And so some of the best companies in the world have Net Promoter Scores that are in the 30, 35, 40% range. Chewsi right now is averaging 74, which means that the concept is really embraced by consumers. They love it. And so dentists look at this and see, I understand that my patients are going, when they hear about Chewsi, they're going to want to use it. And so I'm either going to join because of all the value that Chewsi brings to the table for me, increased case acceptance, more patients, more services, no interference, or I'm afraid I could possibly lose patients. And we really hope and expect that it's more the former. We've got some dentists starting in Rhode Island who are introducing Chewsi. We've seen an office with more than 300 transactions so far for Chewsi patients. Never expected to be that high. We've had one of them coined a phrase for their patients who don't have insurance when they go to pay: cash, check, or Chewsi. So it's really gaining on and with that momentum like a landslide.
Tell us where you got the name. I mean, I'm a dentist, so I'm thinking chewing food. Chewsi. Is Chewsi from chewing food?
Well, we kicked it around a lot. We wanted something that was fun. and we wanted something that would appeal to millennials and so forth, and it wouldn't really be associated with an insurance product. Something that really was disruptive and new and creative. We had another finalist that didn't make it, and that was Chomp. That was a little bit too aggressive for a product name. So we thought Chewsi had great acceptance, and we're happy we chose that.
That's amazing. I want to go back. I want you to put your dad hat on. Pretend that your daughter just graduated from dental school. They're just arriving. They say a millennial is someone who just arrived at the year 2000, kind of like getting your car keys and your first car and your first job. These people are rising, and they're so confused on so many of the terms. Like, I wish you'd explain the difference between, I'm just going to throw a list of education things. Like, what is a insurance versus a benefit? I don't think dental insurance is insurance. It's more of a benefit. It's only really a benefit if someone else pays for it. So when you first talk about that, is dental insurance an insurance or a benefit?
Well, I think dental insurance is different than lots of other types of insurance because it really does two things. So typically, it really prepays for the things that happen often, preventative and diagnostic services, and then it helps spread the risk for higher cost restorative services. So there's really components of both, a prepaid service as well as insurance. And when the employer pays for that, it makes it easier to have insurance because it's easier to have a large risk pool to control those costs. As employers have started to drift away more often from paying for insurance, but just making it available, in many cases the employee pays the whole cost, then it puts the employee in a position where they have to make a decision themselves on the cost benefit as to whether or not insurance is worth it. And that's why I think that when Chewsi is part of the equation, and we have large employees who have a high option plan and a low option plan. Now imagine putting Chewsi alongside that, and I think that the high option plans are going to be extinct because people will buy the low option plan, which is inexpensive, and then use Chewsi to self-insure for all the costs that they don't have to pay for unless they use.
So an individual can buy Chewsi themselves. They don't need to go through a broker, a work broker, or their employer.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing. You're doing an insurance plan that an individual can buy.
Yeah, Howard, I don't even want to say buy because it's free. Okay, the user simply they go to the Apple store or the Google store to download the app. Chewsi Dental is the name. They download it for free and then they register. Okay, and when you register, you will see you can find your dentist, and if your dentist isn't participating, there's an opportunity to enlist them to join us, or you can select from others. And so in Rhode Island, if you pulled up the app and put in Providence or a zip code here, you would see more than 500 dentists within a 35, 40-mile radius of you to choose from. You then will call your dentist for an appointment. It's old school technology because for the most part, dentists don't want anybody connected to their software practice management system, and that's what it would take, and it'd be very expensive as well. And then when you go to the office for your appointment, the office will check you out and process that transaction. We built a web portal for the dentist to use. We also built another tool that would integrate, but so far dentists much prefer the web portal to transact. And what happens is they will process that transaction while you're in the office. It'll go through the cloud to us, and it'll show up on the user's phone in 1 to 2 seconds. And that'll list the services that you had, and you simply hit I approve, and you're done. The dentist transaction gets processed while you're in the office. Just like any credit card transaction, it takes a day or two to clear it for the funds to get there, but all the risk is gone. You receive payment while they're there. There's no waiting for someone to approve that transaction and process a payment form or go through the insurance company process. It's there. So the user doesn't pay anything for that service in addition to what the cost of the carriers is on the phone. No monthly premiums, no charges.
How do you make money off this?
There's a small difference between the amount that the patient pays and the amount that the dentist receives. The dentist has a fee schedule that they agree to, and they get paid 100% of the fees in that schedule. And those fees are typically higher than they get paid from PPOs. And they'll continue to increase, as I mentioned earlier, because the incentives are to lock in a range of savings, not the lowest possible price for the customer. And so dentists who don't trust insurance companies anymore, and I understand why, because there's been a squeeze on reimbursement, Chewsi takes that dynamic away. So if you want to look at the dollar and how it's split, Chewsi picks up the cost of the credit card transaction that dentist would otherwise have to pay for that patient in their office. And that typically runs for the dentist around 3% or so of the costs. So they don't have to worry about that. That comes out of the dollars that are being paid there. And then we collect, typically, it varies by procedure, but typically about 5.5% or so of the transaction is what we retain in order to build the technology, market it, and so forth. And again, think about what I said before, 25% or so of the premium goes to administration for a small group, and we're talking about 5.5%, 6% on average here. So it leaves a lot more of what is being paid to pay for care.
Wow. Now, is Delta Dental, all the other Delta Dentals smiling and waving you on, or are they fearing you?
That's interesting. I think it's a great opportunity for certain, but not all, Delta Dental companies who are hamstrung. They've been successful as Delta Dental plans, and they've maximized their market share, perhaps not totally, but significantly so. And they now geographically limited as to where they can sell their product. I mean, think about us in a state the size of Rhode Island. We have the administrative technological capabilities to serve 50 times as many people as we can sell to here. So for us to expand and diversify, we had to start Altus Dental so we could get more people using that platform and keep the cost lower. And with Chewsi, there are no geographic barriers. So what we're saying to some of our sister plans in the Delta system, and again, this is not a Delta product, they have to look at this outside of that, is that there's a chance for you to become a regional player. You can go beyond your territories. Now, not everybody can play that game, okay? Not everybody wants to play that game, but those companies who are sophisticated know they can't stay just as an insurance company. They have a great opportunity.
I'm going to go back to educating my my homies, because I know from drop me say in the comments after the YouTube video your name, your age, what country you're from, or shoot me an email, howard@dentaltown.com. But every time they send me an email, they're babies. I mean, again, a quarter in dental school. The rest are all under 30. We're probably the two oldest guys they've seen all week. They when they come out of school, they hear a lot of people say, well, I don't take insurance. I just have a fee-for-service office. But in the reality is, I mean, America's a big country. There's 211,000 Americans licensed to practice dentistry. What percent of dentists would you say have no affiliation with insurance? Because like Delta Dental, if you sign up for Delta Dental, you agree to a fee schedule. So Delta Dental is a PPO.
True. In Rhode Island, and I'll look at the country and say that there are certain parts of the country that are very strong with insurance. Okay, the Northeast, the West Coast, the Midwest, those are areas where dental insurance has been very successful. There are other areas where there are more DHMOs or a lack of insurance. You know, the Southwest, the Southeast are areas where there's more DHMOs and dental insurance is not as prevalent.
What's DHMO? What's DMHMO?
A dental health maintenance organization. Those are the capitated plans that dentists typically don't like. Okay.
Right. So those are heaviest in the Southwest and the Southeast?
Southwest and the Southeast.
So yeah, just the whole South?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think the Midwest kind of breaks it up a little bit. There's a lot more insurance there. But if you look at Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire and so forth, more than 90% of the licensed dentists in these states accept insurance. They're part of the Delta Dental network.
Can you be more specific than 90%? Like, take Rhode Island. Like, what percent? Is it 90? Is it 95?
Rhode Island is 92%. Massachusetts, I think, is 94%. Similar amount in New Hampshire. So you're going to see that in the Delta Dental system as a whole, the whole country, even places like the Southeast and Southwest, more than 3 out of 4 dentists participate with Delta Dental across the country. So there's lots of choice. Access to care.
What would you say to this young girl? She's 25. She just walked out of. I mean, how many dental schools does Rhode Island doesn't have any dental schools, does it?
Rhode Island doesn't have one, no.
But Massachusetts, right next to you, has how many? 3.
They have 2. Tufts, Harvard, and UConn has one across the border in Connecticut.
Okay, so let's say she comes out of Tufts and she's $400,000 in debt. She says, I'm going to go downtown Boston. I'm going to open up a dental office, and I don't want to deal with any insurance. I'm just going to be completely non-participating in any dental insurance company. How doable and probable is that?
Not likely.
Right.
Really not likely, especially for lifestyle. Okay, I mean, if what we see is that generations stay together, where a son or daughter of a practicing dentist will join that practice and eventually take over that practice, or they'll sell that practice to a DSO at some point in time. And so it's dentistry is starting to follow the model of medicine, where you'll have larger practices and more administrative services to make that easier in some ways, but it changes the lifestyle. You are less of a decision maker. And so you mentioned earlier that some dentists will say, I'm not going to take insurance. I'm going to charge what I want to charge. That's not reality. And that's why I think, again, Chewsi helps bring patients to that office who doesn't want to accept those deep discounts in insurance, and provides a way out. It provides a balance, okay? And I think over time, the more dentists embrace something like Chewsi, and right now I say something like, there's nothing else like it out there, but the more dentists embrace Chewsi, the more likely they're going to have better control of their lives.
Well, I was so glad you come on, because, and quite frankly, you must be, do you realize that I invited all the Delta Dental CEOs to come on my show 3 years ago, and not only did they not come on, I didn't even get my email returned. I mean, you think you could at least hit reply and say no, but that's how bizarre the relationship is for the insurance companies. And I feel sorry for them, really. I mean, I couldn't imagine selling $1 billion of dental insurance in California, Delta Dental, and not ever being invited to speak at the CDA meeting. I mean, that's just, to me, that's just rude. I always tell the young kids, it's a 5-finger test. Is your new dental office going to be faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost, or more miniature? And if it doesn't answer, it should answer all 5 of those. And if you say, I'm going to see less people for more money and make everything more expensive, it's like, I'm pretty sure that's not the way economics works. And I've always wondered, a lot of dentists complain, well, everybody in America during the Obamacare debates was talking about how much money was spent in admin. I was surprised that Steve Jobs came out with a cell phone in 2007, and here it is 2019, and when people come in my office with insurance, we still have to hire a human being to call the company and verify the insurance. And it's like, why isn't that just an app? Why don't they just pull out their smartphone, which has more computer?
That's Chewsi.
I know. That's why I was so excited to hear you. I mean, well, shouldn't all of the dental insurance companies done this a decade ago?
I'd like to see them all become partners of ours over time. And I mentioned how Chewsi wraps around insurance. Chewsi's agnostic. Chewsi doesn't care if it's wrapping around Delta or Blue Cross or Met or Aetna or Cigna. It doesn't make any difference. Okay, whatever that plan doesn't cover, that insurer, Chewsi steps in and covers that next service. So, we think we're onto something really big. We think the momentum that we hear from the marketplace shows that. We think that having already gotten the acceptance and commitment from a number of other Delta Dental companies around the country to become our partners in their states shows that momentum.
Really?
As I said, yeah, we'll be up to all of our partners right now are Delta Dental companies.
Okay.
And I think that we'll have, as I said earlier, 25 states by the end of 2019 will be on board.
Well, come on, I only care about Arizona. I'm in Phoenix. What's your connection with timeline on Arizona?
I'm actually going to be out there in February. And there's been some interest. Yeah.
So you're going to be at our local Arizona Dental AZ.
I am in February.
Well, tell them invite me over. I would like to do lunch with all of you. Maybe we could do another podcast, on that.
I'd love to have lunch with you.
Yeah,
I'd love to have lunch with you. Let's set that up.
Yeah, let's have Arizona Delta Dental. I think it's been a while since I've been there. I was very, very lucky in my Delta Dental.
I can't commit the Arizona plan to doing that. I can tell you that I'm going to be out there. They've expressed an interest in talking about and moving forward on Chewsi. That's what this is about, to explain it in greater detail to them. We've had some significant discussions and negotiations to date. They see the value. They see that it's important to diversify and expand that way. And so, I think we're all trying to separate the limitations of insurance from the opportunity of Chewsi. And I think you can have both. Although, if you think about it and step back for a second, there's lots of threats to dental insurance that don't threaten other products. Something as simple as bundling. Okay, when a medical carrier gives a credit, if you combine medical and dental, those credits are disproportionate to the value. Okay, we fought that here where a local competitor would give a 1% credit on the medical plan if they got the dental business. Now think about that. Where our average admin for the company as a whole is 8 or 9%, 1% of a medical rate is worth 25 or 30% of a dental rate. So it's an artificial inducement, and the regulators here saw that and have stopped that. But also, I mean, just looking at the connection between periodontal disease and many, many medical conditions, diabetes, many heart conditions and so forth, hypertension. There's lots of reasons to cooperate on data so that patients can get a better outcome by making sure that someone who has diabetes is getting the periodontal treatment. So this is all about data. It's all about reaching out and making sure that people know the value of having the oral health care. We just, this week with the shutdown for the furloughed employees, we offered any government worker who's been furloughed in Rhode Island and Massachusetts a free exam and cleaning from Chewsi. And so we want to make sure they don't forego that important oral health care.
I want to ask you something. You're born and raised in Rhode Island, correct?
I am, yes.
I'm sure you're a world traveler. Back to these young kids, it must be very confusing, especially the political times. I've lectured in 50 countries all around. Why is healthcare such an emotional, political, almost insane? You almost can't have a discussion on it without some form of insanity. Whereas for the rest of, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, France, Europe, Scandinavia, why is it so emotional here in the United States and so non-emotional everywhere else?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I don't think there's any one answer to it. I think it's somewhat similar to control. Health insurance started to be added as an employee benefit, in the 60 years ago, 70 years ago, when during the war there were difficulties in passing on wage increases, so benefits started to be added on, and health insurance was one of the first benefits to go that route. But people didn't focus on the long-term cost of that, so we got into trouble in pensions and in healthcare promises that weren't affordable. And then there's lots of things. I mean, there's just too many different players out there. And people look at Medicare and saying how little is focused on admin in Medicare, but there's no marketing in Medicare. There's no competition in that. And the other thing is that whether it's Medicare or Medicaid, those as big buyers, the costs that are not borne by those types of payers have to be borne by somebody else. So there's a cross subsidy that takes place with Medicare and Medicaid by those who have private insurance or no insurance at all. And obviously, I think we all can talk about the problem with prescription drugs, how we create more of the R&D for successful life-changing prescription drugs, but we also subsidize the rest of the world because we pay higher prices for them. So there's lots of room for change. There's lots of room for data sharing where it's not such a fractured healthcare system. Dental and medical are good examples of that. Dentists and physicians don't really talk to each other very much. We did a clinical research study a while back with the University of Buffalo Dental School, a guy named Bob Jenko who heads up that dental school. And the purpose of that was to determine whether or not a dental office was a better location to screen for diabetes or pre-diabetes, with the logic being that people see their dentist more often than they see their physician. We did that. We screened 1,000 people, and more than 20% of them who had not, and the screening was you had to not know that you had diabetes or pre-diabetes before then. More than 20% of them found out they had diabetes or pre-diabetes. But still, getting the dentists and physicians to work together to then diagnose that and treat that was a failure. So it's a massive opportunity, but it didn't work. And it should work. It was simple A1C test to find out if you had it. You score better than a 5.7, you're screened, go see your physician to be diagnosed and treated, and then combine the care for periodontal disease and diabetes to make sure that that whole cycle is connected.
You know, when I was in MBA school at ASU, the godmother of healthcare economics was up by you, Harvard's Regina Hertzlinger. Are you familiar with Regina Hertzlinger?
I've heard the name. I'm not that familiar, though.
Oh my God, it was just an amazing podcast. But I'm going to ask you the same question I asked her. If you had to, see where America's been for the last, 200 and some years, if you had to roll forward like two more generations, like 50 years from now, do you think it'll be more like a single payer system in healthcare like Canada, or do you think it will not be? I mean, are we moving in that direction, or is there just barriers that will not allow?
Well, I mean, it's, as you know, this country is so fractured politically that's really hard to answer that question because you have extremes who want it and don't want it. But I think, sure, we're gonna move more towards it. It makes sense to move closer to that, but it also makes sense to have things that wrap around it, so that single payer, if you want to call it that, can't cover everything, and there'll be things that you'll want to buy and can buy that aren't covered by that basic policy at some point in time that'll be available to you. And the competition will be who can provide those wraparound services at the best price with the best service. But I think that core, I mean, as a country, we have an obligation to make sure that those who need healthcare have it. And that it's, but when you get to that, when you get to single payer, lots of things happen. Because you not only get regulated benefits and costs, you get regulated reimbursement too. As physicians know, with Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, they make a lot less money than they do in private insurance most of the time. So the whole system changes when you go to that model.
So would you say the biggest front is the providing physicians and dentists money is the answer? What's the question? Do you think it's more of a union mentality that says we know this is going to be a really big affront to our earning power and income, and is that the issue?
In terms of moving forward on Chewsi or moving forward on
single payer,
fixing the system? Well, I think in some ways, single payer for a dentist will look like the dental health maintenance organization. Okay, that the dentist will have to accept a certain level of compensation or reimbursement in providing a whole menu of services. Okay, and that's a model that has good and bad connotations. On the one hand, it leaves the dentist free to determine with their patient what they need. It also provides a disincentive to providing certain levels of care. So it has to be managed totally opposite the way insurance is managed. Insurance, the concern is by the insurance companies, are you doing too much? With the DHMO, the concern should be, are you doing enough? Right? And so and here in Rhode Island, we created as far as I know, it's still the only pay-for-performance system in the country for dental insurance. And what we do is we've paid out over the last 7 or 8 years, we paid out over $25 million in bonuses to dentists for metrics. Metrics in terms of, do they use technology to make sure the administrative costs are controlled? That's a relatively simple thing to do because the technology is so easy to use. Are they doing too much of something and not enough of another? So they get rewarded if they do more fluorides. They get rewarded if they do more sealants. They get rewarded if they do more care for at-risk patients. Okay, so it really is the way, and you know what? 90%, 95% of the dentists in the state get a bonus, and they are starting to practice more similarly to each other when they get more data to see what that is. They don't know, to that point in time, they don't know how they compared. Now they know.
I wish you would use that data to go on Dental Town and solve some of the longest running questions, like which lasts longer, a silver filling or a posterior composite? And, of course, every dentist says, well, I don't care because you're talking about other people's work. In my hands, my fillings are perfect and they last for eternity. And every filling I place, someday it'll go to heaven. And it's like, I don't know. I wish that is my biggest dream of the big insurance companies, that they would turn their data over to algorithms that just answer simple questions. Like if you did a root canal, billet, and crown, how long does that actually last before it's extracted? If you replace that with an implant in a crown, how long does that actually last before it's extracted? If you do a posterior amalgam, I mean, look at an amalgam versus a composite. I mean, one's metal. and half of the ingredient is mercury. You'll never find that in a multivitamin. The other half is silver, zinc, copper, and tin. The whole thing's antibacterial and made of metal. Obviously, that has to last twice as long as an inert plastic tube. But the dentists, they only believe what they want to believe, and it would really be cool to show them, oh, well, here's Delta Dental of Rhode Island. Here's 100 million claims over the last 10 years. Here's how your mathematician sees it.
Yeah, and in fairness to the system, we try to do a lot of that. We don't do it as well as it can be done, but we do combine that data that we all have to determine what lasts. Okay, so how long should a crown last? Should it be 5 years? Should it be 7 years? And what are the circumstances? What are the exceptions to that? How do you not have a hard and fast criteria that doesn't work all the time? And how do you adjust legitimate cases where it doesn't? Okay, where there's patient involvement for it to fail, not the dentist's fault. Okay, so but let me just go back for a second, because again with Chewsi, Chewsi does not interfere with that decision. So if you and your patient want to go forward with the composite, go ahead. Okay, it's your decision. We help finance it. But looking forward, think about how slow insurance is to agree to pay for lots of clinically proven dental procedures. Okay, I mean they take years until their cost is justified, and they're there's beyond the doubt implants being the standard of care. How long did it take? All right. So now look at Chewsi and say, think about the types of services and products that are being introduced today that are going to be clinically sound, but it'll take 10 years for insurance to agree to pay for it. Chewsi will pay for it as soon as you, the patient, and the dentist agree you want to have it done. So Chewsi is going to help really expedite the adoption of new services and technologies.
We have 9 specialties, and most of them are pretty smooth, but a couple of them are under a lot of disruption. One of them is pediatric dentistry with silver diamine fluoride. How are you seeing silver diamine fluoride in Rhode Island?
Howard, I wish I could answer that question for you. I can't. I could research it for you and get back to you. I'm not aware of us having a problem with it, okay, but I can get back to you. One of the issues is that in a state this size, we have 550 dentists in Rhode Island. We probably have 10 periodontists.
Yeah.
Very, very large practices. And again, as you know, general dentists are doing the things that periodontists are doing. General dentists are doing things that oral surgeons are doing. And so it's unlike anything else where the general dentist, by their own choice and training, touches so many other so-called specialties, whether they're comfortable with it, whether they've had that training.
Let me go to another direction. DSOs. When these kids are in dental school, a lot of DSOs will come in and they'll offer them free pizza. So, of course, you get all the hungry dental students for lunch. And then they load them up that when people like our age, when I was little, all the pharmacists worked for themselves. Now they all got rolled up into a big Walgreens or CVS. And they're in there saying you basically don't have a chance to go out on your own, and that they're going to have half of all the dental market within 10 years. What do you think of those bold claims that I keep hearing dental students emailing me, howard@dentaltown.com, hearing these lectures?
I think, in my opinion, there's 2 different types of DSOs. Okay, there's the ones that are very visible from a marketing perspective. The Aspen Dentals of the world. Okay, who market themselves very aggressively and own the business. Okay, then there's the DSOs who provide administrative efficiencies to you as a practicing dentist, and it's almost invisible. So in that respect, I think that's a good movement.
Like a Heartland.
Yes, that behind the scenes are making you more efficient so that you can work less hours, you can make more money, but they're not. And then there's all different flavors in between. But on one end, if you have the DSOs that make you more administratively efficient, that's a good thing. If you have the ones that make you work for them and they market it and so forth. And so when we recruit dentists for Chewsi, here's what we do. We go to the DSOs who, and even solo practitioners who say, I have an in-office plan. I have a discount arrangement that I have with my patients. And we say, well, that's not bringing you any new patients. Nobody's marketing it for you, okay? You have a way to deal with patients who are asking for some relief, but you're not getting new patients along those lines. So Chewsi gets those patients in your door, and then provides a simple way, not to have to barter, a simple way of saying, you know what, I can't afford 3 crowns. Download Chewsi, you'll make those savings. I take myself out of that bartering process. But the DSOs that we try to recruit are not the Aspens, because they're out there marketing those services themselves. They don't necessarily need Chewsi to bring them more patients. I think we're looking for different patients, but I think that's the way that works. And so if I look at this, I think, we're going, who knows how fast, but certainly directionally towards more DSOs. You're saying half. I look at the medical model first and see where that is today. And there aren't many physicians who are practicing on their own. They're all part of group practices at first, and now they're associated with hospitals. So that vertical integration and that the center of care has become so consolidated. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges for dentists in the future, 5 years or 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Won't dentists be part of that center of excellence? Won't they be part of that medical home? I think they will be.
I also think it's so funny in dentistry where the people that are against DSOs the most, they're always the ones talking about the need for a CBCT for $100,000 or a laser for $100,000 or a CAD cam for $100,000. And those are the exact reasons why the medical community consolidated. I mean, if you're going to buy an MRI and an ultrasound and there's 168 hours in a week, you're not going to give it to Betty for 32 hours a week when 81% of the week that machine's just sitting there laying on. And plus, when I think of healthcare, my first biggest concerns are availability and affordability. And when you're solo practice, you're open 32 hours a week, and that means 81% of the week you're not open. In group practice, I mean, like in Phoenix, Arizona, when you come out here to visit, if you go climb one of these mountains, these desert mountains, and fall off and break your leg, if it's Sunday, the ambulance will be there, the helicopter will be there, and the police, everyone will be there. But if you break off your front tooth, good luck, buddy. You're going to have to know a dentist on his cell phone to take you after hours. I mean, there's not a dental office open in Phoenix on a Sunday.
And how I go back to, that 32-hour-a-week model is not recent. That's been around for a long time. But the fact that so many families have to have 2 wage earners to survive, and they can't take time away from work to be there during those 32 hours. And so that's why the DSOs, the Aspen Dentals of the world and so forth, are part of their attraction is that they are accessible. And in general, I think dentists think that patients know how to assess quality much more than patients do. And what a patient sees as quality, generally speaking, is it's a clean office. I like the personality of the hygienist or the dentist, okay? Unless they have a really negative experience, they assume good quality, okay? And so that's a real challenge. So when you add convenience to the list and you add affordability to the list, it picks away at the 32-hour-a-week dentist's ability to add to its patient base. And I don't necessarily believe these numbers, but we've done a couple of surveys for Chewsi early on in the first few months and again more recently. And what we found, which I think is extraordinary, I've talked to some dentists and they agree with it, but I think the numbers are too big. We would explain what Chewsi is and the benefit it has for the consumer. And in one survey, it was 50%, the other was 60% of those respondents said that they would change dentists in order to get those savings. Now, I don't think that number is pretty high. I don't think that's the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 20 or 30 or 40%, but 50 or 60. And so you run into 2 types of responses from dentists. Nobody's going to leave me, or you know what? I'm afraid everybody's going to leave me, and I have to make changes in order to keep my patients. And the true answer is somewhere in between, but no one's bulletproof when it comes to their patients leaving them.
Well, I think one of the answers to that might be there's 3 publicly traded DSOs on there, 2 in Australia, one in Singapore. I podcasted them on location in their countries, and what they told me is that baby boomers like you and me, we lived through before water fluoridation, before fluoridated toothpaste. 10% of Americans at age 65 are edentulous times 2, missing half their teeth. At 74, 20% edentulous times 2, missing half their teeth. Those people know there's good dentists and bad dentists and all that. But dentists did such a good job that the millennials, they grew up with fluoridated toothpaste, fluoridated water. They've only had cleanings, maybe 1 filling. And when you study a millennial and their friend says, oh, my appendix ruptured and they took me to the hospital and took it out, they just assume you wouldn't be working in a hospital taking out appendix if you weren't a doctor and certified. And so we got so good that the millennials see us as a commodity, but the baby boomers are still only the ones left to say, hey, Joe Nagle might be a really good dentist, but I know Howard's not. He did a root canal on my dad, and they ended up pulling it, and he died a week later, and blah, blah, blah. So I think we are really approaching commoditization towards the millennials, and that's what all three of the only publicly traded DSOs say. I want to say on that one deal about DSOs, another really, what about my orthodontist listening to you right now? How does Chewsi play with ortho? Because I do think of the 9 specialties, orthodontics is under the most disruption with. Invisalign is now opening their own stores here in Phoenix. They have one in Chandler Fashion Mall where all the rich people in Scottsdale and Paradise Valley are. Smiles Direct Club has already 5 in the Valley. And I just talked to their founders on the phone. They might be coming on the show. But so talk about the disruption in orthodontics. Does Chewsi affect orthodontics, Smiles Direct Club, Invisalign? Talk to my orthodontist.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is a new phenomenon, but also periodontists and many general dentists are doing ortho as well. And so, when you look for ortho services, you're not just looking for an orthodontist. And so I think that's really a factor that isn't fully appreciated. So when it comes to Chewsi, we try to recruit orthodontists because in Rhode Island, we are maybe an anomaly in that there's a very high percentage of our Delta Dental members who have orthodontic coverage as part of their benefit plan. That's not the case in many other states. It's not the case to the same degree in Massachusetts. And so for children, it's important for them to be able to get access to that because, there's so many kids who have ortho treatment today. 30 years ago, they weren't a candidate for it. It's a different world today in terms of its exception to the kid who doesn't have orthodontic treatment. But the cost is just so unaffordable. And then you get to adult ortho. And there are many, many more people who are looking for those services that aren't covered by any of their insurance plans. So Chewsi is an opportunity for that to happen. And we really want to promote that. We don't need as big of a discount from an orthodontist because the dollars themselves are so big. If you have a $5,000 case, it doesn't take a big percentage to save your customer some significant dollars, even if the percentage isn't as great as it would be for a cleaning exam and an X-ray. But in many ways, I think for a long time, people thought that orthodontists were bulletproof in terms of really not necessarily being susceptible to a lot of what happens in insurance. But as you said, you get Invisalign and you get Smile Direct, and who knows what's next. It's a very disruptive threat to orthodontists.
And I also think, give the people what they want. I mean, I think a long time orthodontists and dentists have been selling that you need to have this bite and this function and your midline in the middle and making a mountain molehill, where the people, all they wanted was whiter, brighter, sexier teeth. I mean, they just want to go into the nightclub and have fairly straight, white, smiley teeth. They're not asking where the mesiobuccal cusp of number 3 is and when it hits number 30 and these dentists that are extracting teeth.
If they're asked that question, they're not going to be very popular in a nightclub.
Yeah, right? I mean, and a lot of the, I remember seeing, I remember what blew my mind is when an orthodontist wanted me to pull 4 bicuspids 30 years ago because that was the only way he'd fix the midline. And I was standing in his office, and his wife was a receptionist. I said, well, where's your wife's midline? Is it to the right or to the left? And he couldn't answer me. I'm like, okay, well, you had 3 kids with this lady, so her midline, must not be the midline. So when someone wants just whiter, brighter, straighter teeth, maybe they don't want a mountain out of a molehill, and maybe they just want something. Again, my 5 fingers. Is it faster? Is it easier? Is it higher quality? Is it lower cost? Is it more miniature? I want to ask a whole nother subject. I only got you for a couple more minutes. My gosh, I can't believe we're coming up on the hour. I only got 3 more minutes with you. Teledentistry. Is that a thing? Is that theory? Is that reality? Is the rubber hitting the road?
We have a subsidiary called Altus Ventures. We started a small boutique venture capital firm here as a subsidiary, and we looked at some teledentistry opportunities. And there's one called Virtue Dent here in Massachusetts, and so that model really depends in large form on an insurance company's willingness to embrace it, because if insurance doesn't cover the teledentistry, doesn't matter. You're missing 60-70% of the population if you can't get into that framework. I think that teledentistry does work and has its role. I think when you see large employers who want to have the dentist come out to them, to go out to see their employees and bring a van out there and have your hygienists and assistants out there in a van. And what the Virtue Dent model was, we're going to take the x-rays, we're going to send them through the cloud to a dentist who's going to look at those x-rays, and they're going to get consistency of application. They're going to get consistency of treatment plan, because as you know, there's so many stories over the years about you see 10 dentists, you have 10 different treatment plans. What employers want is some consistency that's tied to science. And I think that's one area where teledentistry can bring some efficiencies, where that dentist can service a lot more in terms of patients remotely. Obviously, there'll be cases where that dentist has to see that patient, on site. But that dentist who's remote can refer to a dentist who can see those patients too, as long as they're all part of the same integrated network.
But so that's in Virtue Dent. That's Dr. Hitesh Talani, founder and CEO of Virtue Dent. But the bottom line is there is zero standardization in dentistry. I mean, so back to you kids back in the day. Back when we grew up with only 3 TV stations, ABC, CBS, NBC, the number one magazine in the United States was Reader's Digest. Everybody's grandma had it on their desk. And they sent a journalist around with an FMX, a set of x-ray study models to 30 different dentists, including the dean of the University of Kentucky Dental School, and they got 30 different treatment plans. Then the government, the NIH, looked at that and said, is this sensational journalism or is this true? So they redid the study to 100 dentists and only got 2 treatment plans the same, and those were the 2 who said he didn't need anything. And then treatment plan 3 to 100 was different. Being on Dental Town all day, every day from 1999 to now, I mean, you put up a set of x-rays, I mean, it's a free-for-all for all people say. I mean, I see it like a little girl will have a little chip, and I'll say, smooth it out. The next person say, oh, put a little composite there. Next person will say, 8 veneers. The other one will say, orthodontics, headgear, jaw surgery, Botox. I mean, there's just nothing standardized about dentistry. The diagnosis and treatment plan is not standardized. I mean, hell, you can't even get dentists to agree that the oral health compromise of switching from a tooth-colored filling to a silver filling is cuts the longevity in half. Half of Americans are afraid of the dentist. I mean, I'm guarantee if you looked at every 10-year-old boy in the eye and said, hey, if I do this silver filling, no one will ever see it, and it'll stay in there till you're 50 years old. I bet you half of them would say, give me that. But
I agree. But go back to Virtue Dent just for a second, because I know Hitesh has not gotten as far along with this from the insurance side as he'd like to, but the basic premise was really sound from an employer's perspective, because what he basically said was that remote dentist is going to be either at Tufts Dental School or Harvard Dental School, and you're going to get the academic, no incentive for overtreatment or undertreatment. Okay, no financial incentive. It's an academic view. Of course, not everybody agrees on that, but there'll be a narrower range of outcomes in those treatment plans, and the employers think that's a great idea, but it doesn't fit into the insurance model. Why? Because someone's going to get paid for that. If you're going to get paid for a visit, for an exam remotely, you're taking away from one of the exams that the local dentist can have of the 2 that may be covered by that plan. So there's restrictions in the way the economics work and the incentives work inside that plan. But if you have an integrated system, that should go away. And we're a long ways away from that. When we get to a dental home and medical home where dental's part of that, I think you're closer to solving the conflicts.
Okay, well, I mean, my gosh, you gave me an hour of your time. First of all, everybody listen to this in your car. Give this guy a round of applause. He's the first Delta Dental CEO to ever come on. I mean, how many shows have I done? I mean, my God, I've done, 1,100 shows, I think, like that? How many have I done? I've done 1,127. We have 9,400 of you subscribed to us on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. 25,000 follow us on Twitter. 36,000 follow us on LinkedIn. And my gosh, this is the only man brave enough to come on my show. What was it scary, Joe? Were you scared, or was it all right?
Oh, I loved it. Okay, and I'd like to, if we can hook up while I'm out in Arizona, I'd love to do that.
Well, you're going to be out here for Alan Alford is the CEO of Dental. I want to ask you one. Can I ask you an overtime question?
Sure.
Okay, when I talked to Rick Workman, who's the founder of Heartland Dental, he's been on the show, and his amazing Pat Bowers on the show. Rick Workman was like me in the fact that when he was in Effingham, he would go to the dental insurance companies and say, hey, you sell claims for everybody in the state of Illinois. Are there some cities that have less providers than other? And the insurance company said, oh my God, here's a list of 10 cities that we all wish at Delta of Illinois that some dentist would be there. Well, that's where they went. I mean, my question is, and you should look at a dental insurance company as an ally. So my question to you is, back to that graduate. She just walked out of Tufts. She's got $500,000 in CEO debt. You're sitting on top of dental insurance. You have so much data. Do demographics matter in the fact that would she have a higher likelihood of success going to a small town of 1,500 without a dentist as opposed to downtown Boston?
I would say no. I think it all equalizes in the end. A lot of those small places are remote places, okay, where Indian reservations, very rural areas, okay, where now some mid-level practitioners getting expanded practice, treatments as well. So, I don't think there's any permanent geographic equalizer that way, because the vacuum will be filled. If I'm looking, I have a shortage of periodontists in a certain area, that's going to be filled because price is going to matter at some point in time. And so I think it's a real hard question as to I just don't think the economics are as good going forward for any new dentist as they were in the past. I think they can be managed, but I think it's a different outlook than it was in the past. But it's also a different outlook in terms of work-life balance. It's a different outlook as far as having to deal with the insurance company, because in those DSOs, somebody else is dealing with them, and that dentist hopefully is just providing the clinical care. So it's an imperfect system. It'll always be an imperfect system. It's heading in a certain direction. But I'd love to keep the lines of communication open with you, Howard. If you want to talk from time to time, certainly
yeah,
would love
when you
to do
come
that.
out to see Alan Alford, I would love to get back together with you, show you Dental Town, have lunch with you. And I'd love to see Alan Alford too. I've my team's gone up there and seen him before. I mean, if you owned a restaurant, you bought $1 million of beef a year from a beef guy, you should have lunch with that beef guy. I mean, I love networking the value chain. I always last. And I just want to say one last thing about the student loan debt. A lot of you are really depressed that you're $500,000 student loans. Well, let me put that in perspective for you. There's no dentist in America who got divorced for less than $1 million. So if you just don't get married and don't get divorced, you're already negative $500,000. A kid. I had 4 kids. I mean, each kid is going to cost you $500,000. So if you're $500,000 in student loans, instead of saying you want 3 kids, have 2. Instead of having 4 kids, have 2. And just don't get married. What do you think the average divorce cost the average dentist in Rhode Island in the 30 years you've been watching this? What would you just guess?
I don't know, but I think probably the leading cause is not knowing where your wife's midline is, because you're not paying enough attention.
And we'll end on that note. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was just an honor to podcast interview you today.
I enjoyed it, Howard. I'll pay attention to your podcast. Thank you.
Okay, I'll see you in Phoenix.